The stars above Earth shimmered peacefully as the faint hum of the planet's everyday life continued below, but that calm was shattered in an instant when the Zarhin fleet emerged from the blackness of space. With no warning at all, Earth's early warning systems barely registered the alien ships. They were so advanced that the technology used to detect them had no chance of recognition. The first sign humanity had of their arrival was the inexplicable silence that overtook the night skies, as if the universe itself held its breath as the massive warships spread out like an iron curtain blocking any hope of escape. At first, Earth's leaders assumed it was some kind of anomaly, or a miscalculation, a drifting cloud of space debris, or perhaps a distant comet passing through the system. But then the ships came closer, their sheer size overwhelming any rational thought, their dark forms silhouetted against the sun as they moved steadily into orbit across the planet. Humanity's greatest minds gathered in a sudden panic, struggling to comprehend the impossible. These ships weren't natural. They were alive with technology that outstripped anything Earth had ever seen before. The Zarhin were not just conquerors, they were an empire that had trampled countless civilizations across the galaxy. Their ships were armed with weapons capable of erasing entire fleets in a single blast. Their soldiers were the stuff of nightmares, and their emperor ruled with an iron fist, merciless and unyielding. The Zarhin had come for Earth, and they had come with the certainty of victory that only centuries of galactic conquest could breed. As their lead ship broadcast its message across the planet, a cold mechanical voice echoed through every communication channel. "This is the Zarhin Empire. We have arrived to claim your world. Submit to us or be destroyed." It was simple, clear, and devoid of mercy. Their terms were non-negotiable. The transmission ended with a deafening silence that hung in the air like a guillotine waiting to fall. Humanity's response was not immediate. The leaders of Earth were paralyzed by the magnitude of the threat. They had no military power capable of standing against such an overwhelming force. Their ships were too slow, too poorly equipped, their weapons too primitive, and their defenses were laughable in comparison to the might of the Zarhin. It seemed inevitable that humanity would bend to their will and face extinction, as so many others had before. But not all hope was lost. Earth's top commanders and military experts gathered in a makeshift war room as the looming shadow of the alien fleet darkened their world. Their faces were grim, but their minds were working furiously. They knew they had no chance of winning in a conventional battle, but there had to be another way. There had to be something they hadn't thought of, something the Zarhin wouldn't expect. Among them stood Commander Rachel Hayes, an officer with years of experience in tactical warfare. She was one of the few who had faced death and emerged victorious. But even she had never faced an enemy like this. As the meeting progressed, Hayes remained silent, watching the screen above, showing the steady approach of the alien ships. Her mind was racing. It was clear that Earth couldn't fight this enemy head-on. But what if they didn't need to? What if they could exploit the one thing the Zarhin overlooked: the unpredictability of humanity? The clock was ticking, and Earth's fate hung in the balance. But in that room, the seeds of resistance were being planted. No one knew it yet, but this moment would be remembered as the first step in a battle that would shake the galaxy to its core. As Earth's leaders convened in a desperate scramble to respond to the alien threat, Commander Rachel Hayes stood at the center of the war room, her mind working at a frantic pace. The Zarhin fleet had arrived with devastating precision. Their demands were clear, but Earth's answer was not yet written. The planetary defense systems were overwhelmed before they could even react, their weapons too weak to pose any real threat to the invaders. And the clock was ticking. With every passing hour, the Zarhin grew closer to making their move. The human fleet was still in its infancy, a hastily assembled force of ships, hastily constructed over the past few years, all equipped with outdated weapons and makeshift technology, nothing compared to the might of the Zarhin. It was not an army, it was a collection of survivors trying to stand against a storm. Commander Hayes knew this better than anyone. She had trained in combat since she was young, had seen more battles than most ever would, but even she felt the crushing weight of the situation. It was the end of the line for Earth unless something changed, unless they could find a way to turn the tide. In the war room, the atmosphere was thick with tension and uncertainty. Experts were arguing over the best course of action. Some suggested surrendering, others wanted to try to make a stand, But all the strategies they proposed seemed doomed to fail in the face of overwhelming alien firepower. The problem was not just the enemy's strength, but the sheer unpredictability of their tactics, their ability to strike before anyone could react to any countermeasure, before any plan could be set in motion. It was in this chaos that Hayes spoke up, her voice calm but fierce. She proposed an idea, a gamble that would put the very survival of humanity on the line. A new kind of strategy, a new kind of warfare, one that Earth's leaders hadn't even considered, let alone believed possible. She suggested they use their weakness as their greatest strength. Instead of trying to match the Jarhin in a direct confrontation, they would have to outthink them, surprise them with tactics that the alien empire would never expect. Humanity was not as advanced as the Jarhin, not by a long shot, but Earth had something the Jarhin didn't have: the raw ingenuity to adapt and improvise under pressure, the ability to think creatively when the situation was dire. Earth's military might not have the technological superiority, but it had a centuries-old tradition of turning desperate situations into opportunities for victory. It had the spirit of resilience, the will to fight even when the odds were insurmountable. Hayes proposed a simple plan at first, but one that would take everything they had left to execute. They would use Earth's environment itself as a weapon: the asteroid fields, the gravitational anomalies, the magnetic fields around the planet, all would be turned into deadly traps, designed to confuse and disorient the Jarhin fleet. It was a plan based on deception, misdirection, and speed. The Jarhin might have superior weapons, but they had one blind spot. They had never encountered an enemy who fought like humans did. The room fell silent as the gravity of the proposal sank in. The plan was risky beyond belief, but Hayes had no doubt it was their best chance. Earth's fleet was small, but it could be quick and agile. If they used the terrain to their advantage, they might be able to create enough chaos to force the Jarhin into a position where they could strike decisively. With a shared glance of reluctant agreement, the leaders of Earth's defense forces gave Hayes the go-ahead. It was a gamble, a shot in the dark, but it was the only shot they had, and so the plan was set into motion. Earth's Starfleet would take to the skies and become a force of nature itself. The Jarhin might think they had already won, but humanity was about to show them how wrong they were. As the first Jarhin warship entered the orbit of Earth, the entire planet held its breath. The alien fleet moved into position with cold precision, their weapons charged and ready, their commanders already anticipating the swift collapse of humanity's defenses. What the Jarhin didn't account for was the human ability to adapt and think beyond the conventional. As the first shots were fired by the alien ships, hitting Earth's defenses with destructive force, the human fleet remained hidden out of sight in the shadows of asteroids and the cold emptiness of space. Commander Rachel Hayes watched from the bridge of the Liberty's Edge the human flagship. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the movements of the Jarhin fleet. Every calculation was vital, every moment a potential for disaster, but there was something they hadn't accounted for. The Jarhin believed themselves masters of war, but Hayes knew the truth. They were predictable. They had grown accustomed to crushing weaker species by overwhelming them with superior firepower. They expected humanity to crumble under the pressure, and they would be wrong. Hayes turned to her crew, the officers and engineers working furiously to make the plan come to life. "We're ready," she said quietly, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet intensity. "Take us into position." The Liberty's Edge moved slowly, at first slipping through the debris field of asteroids and broken satellites, using the natural obstacles to mask their presence from the Jarhin scanners. They had no intention of engaging the enemy directly, not yet, not until the time was right. Instead, they were about to bait the Jarhin into a trap, one they never saw coming. Meanwhile, throughout the human fleet, chaos was under control. Each ship was positioned strategically to take advantage of Earth's space environment. The asteroid belt was now their ally. The Jarhin were used to enemies that ran in straight lines, predictable, easy targets. But humanity's ships were different, using quick burst thrusters to zip between rocks and debris in erratic patterns to confuse the alien sensors and weapons. The Jarhin fired blindly at the empty space where they thought their targets would be, only to find themselves wasting precious energy. Lieutenant Mark Willis, a fighter pilot aboard the Thunderstrike Asterisk, the human fleet's most agile ship, flew through the asteroid field with unmatched skill, dodging and weaving between massive chunks of rock. As if he were born to navigate the void of space, his orders were clear: distract, disrupt, and evade as long as possible. He could see the Jarhin ships above them, beginning to make mistakes trying to target him with their advanced weaponry. But their calculations were wrong every time. He used their technology against them, flipping through the air and creating false readings to confuse their systems. The Jarhin were confused, but not yet desperate. They still believed they would crush the humans with brute force. They unleashed wave after wave of firepower in an attempt to break through the invisible walls humanity had built around them. But they didn't realize that Earth's ships weren't just hiding, they were studying the Jarhin movements, learning their patterns and weaknesses. Commander Hayes knew it was only a matter of time before the Jarhin began to doubt their own superiority. Their confidence was their greatest vulnerability, and humanity was about to exploit it. Hours passed with Earth's fleet moving in and out of position, striking when the opportunity arose, then vanishing into the black void again. The Jarhin fleet began to shift and scatter as they tried to cover every angle, but with each passing moment their tactics grew more desperate and erratic. The Jarhin had underestimated the human spirit, and Hayes could feel the turning tide. She knew the Jarhin had not yet lost, but they were close. Their arrogance had cost them dearly, and now humanity was on the offensive. As the Jarhin fleet began to grow increasingly frustrated with the unpredictability of the human response, Commander Rachel Hayes kept her eyes glued to the battle unfolding on the holographic display in front of her on the bridge of the Liberty's Edge. Each pilot was playing their part in this complex game of cat and mouse. Hayes knew they had only one shot at this. The Jarhin might be powerful, but they were not used to fighting in such a dynamic environment. The human fleet's greatest advantage was its ability to think on its feet, to adapt in real time to the ever-changing battlefield. Lieutenant Mark Willis danced through the asteroid field like a ghost, his fighter, the Thunderstrike darting between colossal rocks and debris too fast for the Jarhin to hit. Their weapons were powerful, but too slow and too predictable. Willis had become a blur to them, his ship flickering in and out of their targeting range like a flickering star. As he altered his trajectory at the last possible moment, the Jarhin began to grow increasingly uncertain, unable to lock onto their target, and frustrated by the sheer audacity of their opponent's tactics. Willis's small victory was more than just personal. It was a crack in the Jarhin's seemingly impenetrable confidence. Meanwhile, in the darkness of space outside Earth's atmosphere, Hayes initiated the second phase of the plan. The decoy tactic. Earth's fleet had planted false signals across the solar system using abandoned satellites and decommissioned probes to create a web of false targets. These signals were designed to draw the Jarhin ships into blind chases, leading them away from the true locations of the human fleet. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was enough to buy time for the next move. Hayes had one last surprise in store. All ships, Hayes said, her voice firm, prepare for the EMP strike. We move in 10 minutes. The crew on the Liberty's Edge went into a tense silence as they began their final approach. The Jarhin, still scattered and confused, were too caught up in their pursuit of the decoys to notice that Earth's fleet was closing in on them from all directions. The time to strike had come, and the humans were prepared to unleash the full force of their guerrilla tactics. The EMP device, a last-minute innovation, had been placed on one of the largest asteroids in the belt, a massive object that the Jarhin had largely ignored in their calculations as they focused on Earth's outer defenses. The plan was simple. Once the EMP detonated, the Jarhin fleet would be blinded for a few precious moments, their technology completely incapacitated. A moment of chaos in which the humans could make their move. Earth's ships would then pounce, using their maneuverability and the element of surprise to take down as many of the disoriented enemy ships as possible. Hayes could feel the tension building as the countdown began. The enemy fleet remained oblivious to the trap closing around them. The Liberty's Edge and its comrades moved silently into position, their hulls hidden in the shadows of the asteroid field. Weapons aimed and ready, the human fleet had worked quickly and efficiently, setting up their attack from every possible angle. Each ship was a cog in the larger machine, a single point in a web of deception and precision. Then it happened. The EMP exploded with a shockwave that rippled through the solar system, sending out pulses of magnetic energy, strong enough to disable every Zarhin ship in range. Their weapon systems faltered and died. Their shields flickered and dropped, and their communication channels fell silent in an instant. It was as if the universe had stopped turning. The once mighty fleet was now blind and crippled, nothing more than sitting ducks floating in space. Commander Hayes felt a rush of exhilaration, but it was short-lived. The battle wasn't over, but this was their moment. Their chance to strike was now. The EMP pulse had done its job, disabling the Zarhin fleet with stunning precision. For a brief moment, the space around Earth felt like a dream. A silence, an eerie calm where the once mighty Zarhin warships now drifted aimlessly, their systems dead and their once confident commanders frozen in disbelief. The human fleet, having carefully prepared for this very moment, surged forward with newfound determination. Commander Rachel Hayes knew this was their only chance. If they hesitated for even a second, the Zarhin would recover, and humanity's last stand would end in ashes. All ships, engage. Hayes barked, her voice as sharp as a blade. The battle was no longer about survival. It was about victory. The Liberty's Edge surged forward, weaving through the asteroid field, as Earth's fleet followed in formation. The human ships, lighter and faster than their alien counterparts, darted in and out of the crippled Zarhin fleet, exploiting every gap and weakness with surgical precision. Their weapon systems were far from the alien might of the invaders, but the humans made up for it in tenacity and raw aggression. The Zarhin warships, now struggling to regain control of their systems, fired blindly into the void, missing their targets by miles. Lieutenant Mark Willis, the ace pilot of the Thunderstrike dove between two massive asteroids, his heart pounding in his chest as his hands danced across the controls. His fighter, nimble and swift, fired a barrage of laser shots that hit the exposed belly of a Zarhin cruiser, sending it spiraling out of control. The explosion sent debris flying in all directions, but Willis was already off, racing toward the next target. He had become a blur of destruction, a force of nature in the chaos of battle. The Zarhin flagship, a colossal vessel with weapons that could shatter moons, had been left paralyzed by the EMP. It hung in space like a wounded beast, its once pristine hull now flickering with instability. The Zarhin commanders, still struggling to recover their technology, sent frantic messages to their fleet, but no one could respond in time. Their arrogance had led them to believe they were untouchable, and now humanity was proving just how wrong they had been. Hayes didn't hesitate. She ordered the Liberty's Edge to close in on the Zarhin flagship, knowing this was their moment to end it all. The ship's weapons locked onto the flagship's vulnerable core, but the captain of the Liberty's Edge knew they couldn't do this alone. She turned to her crew, her face grim but determined. "Everyone, this is it. We don't stop until that ship is a pile of scrap." The crew responded in unison, their resolve hardening. The Liberty's Edge was closing in. Hayes watched as the Zarhin flagship's defenses flickered back online, their desperate attempts to regain control falling short. It was like watching a dying animal trying to flee. It was clear that the Zarhin were finished. But just as Hayes prepared to fire the final shot, a new threat emerged. A handful of Zarhin warships, their systems slowly rebooting, broke free from their paralysis. They had re-established some semblance of communication, and their commanders were desperately rallying the scattered forces. The fight was far from over. Humanity's ships were outnumbered and outgunned, but the Zarhin were not yet fully back on their feet. Earth's fleet had the momentum, and for the first time, it seemed like victory was possible. Hayes saw it in the eyes of her crew. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something far greater. "Prepare to fire," Hayes commanded, as the Liberty's Edge closed the gap on the flagship. The Jarhin had underestimated humanity in ways they couldn't have imagined. Now, in the cold void of space, Earth's forces would show them just how wrong they were. The Jarhin flagship loomed before them, its massive, battered form a testament to the alien fleet's once unstoppable power. But now, it was nothing more than a behemoth stranded in space, its weapons and shields failing one by one. Yet despite the chaos of the battle, the Jarhin were not finished. Their warships, though still disoriented, were beginning to regroup, and their commanders, desperate to maintain any semblance of control, had issued orders for a counteroffensive. It wasn't over, not yet. Commander Rachel Hayes knew this moment would define the fate of Earth. The Jarhin were powerful, but they were no longer invincible. Earth had done the impossible, disrupted their fleet, and struck at their confidence. But the clock was ticking. The EMP's effects were starting to wear off, and the Jarhin were slowly regaining their systems. If they managed to organize a coherent defense, the tide of battle could shift back in their favor. The gamble that Hayes had set in motion was risky, but it was the only move they had left. "Lieutenant Willis, ready the Thunderstrike for one last assault," Hayes ordered. Her voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of the galaxy. Willis's voice crackled through the comms, sharp and focused. "You got it, Commander. I'm on it." The Thunderstrike was already moving, darting into position, weaving between the remaining asteroids, its systems primed for one final push. But this wasn't just about hitting the enemy ship. It was about something far more audacious. The human fleet, battered and bruised, was about to pull off a move that the Jarhin would never expect. The plan was simple but lethal. While the Jarhin flagship remained paralyzed, Earth's fleet would use the opening to breach its core. The Liberty's Edge and several smaller ships would engage in a distraction, drawing attention to themselves while Willis and a select group of elite pilots would slip past the enemy lines and board the flagship, directly targeting its control center. It was a suicide mission, but there was no other choice. If they could disable the flagship's command structure, the Jarhin would lose their nerve, their ability to coordinate. Without their flagship, the rest of their fleet would be left in disarray. And that would be humanity's chance to end the war. Hayes watched the Liberty's Edge move toward the flagship, its guns blazing, drawing fire from every direction. The Jarhin ships, still reeling from the earlier strike, fired back with everything they had, but the humans had anticipated this. They'd known that the enemy would be desperate to regain control. The Liberty's Edge was fast, its maneuvering too unpredictable for the Jarhin to track. Every shot they'd fired missed by inches as Earth's fleet darted between the wreckage of their own fallen ships and shattered asteroids. Then, in the midst of the chaos, the moment arrived. Willis and his squadron of ace pilots slipped past the Jarhin defenses, invisible to their sensors, moving in with surgical precision. The Thunderstrike led the charge, its cannons blasting through the hull of the flagship's lower sections, creating a path for the smaller boarding craft to slip inside. "We're in," Willis said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The boarding ships, piloted by a team of Earth's best engineers and soldiers, rushed into the opening. Inside the Jarhin flagship, chaos erupted as humans infiltrated the heart of their command center. They fought through halls that once held the most advanced technology the galaxy had ever seen, now reduced to a maze of malfunctioning systems and collapsing walls. The humans were outnumbered, but their speed, ingenuity, and ruthless determination made up for their lack of firepower. Hayes, back on the Liberty's Edge watched the countdown begin. She knew they had only minutes before the Jarhin launched a final counterattack. The flagship's command center had to be disabled before then. Every second counted. As the humans fought their way to the heart of the Jarhin flagship, Hayes knew that this battle was no longer just about a military victory. It was about sending a message to the stars. Humanity had fought back, and no empire, no matter how powerful, could ever take their world again. The Jarhin flagship began to tremble as the charges detonated, sending shockwaves through its core. For a brief moment, the chaos inside seemed to fade as the human boarding team made their final retreat, their mission accomplished. They had disabled the central control system, rendering the flagship and, by extension, the Jarhin fleet vulnerable. The once dominant alien power was now in disarray. But their commanders weren't finished yet. They still had one final weapon in reserve, their desperation. "Everyone, move." Lieutenant Mark Willis shouted over the comms, his voice sharp. The team raced through the halls of the now wounded flagship, knowing the clock was ticking down. The charges they planted would take minutes to reach full detonation, but that was still too long in a ship as large as this. The escape route had been planned to perfection, but with every second, they could feel the enemy closing in. Behind them, the flagship's corridors were lighting up with warning signals. The Jarhin were scrambling. Some were still locked in the fight against the human boarding party, while others were racing to restart the ship's systems. But it was all futile. The flagship was crippled, and now the time had come to make their escape. The team was nearly halfway back to the docking bay when the comms crackled to life, and Hayes's voice rang out. "Report, Lieutenant. What's your status?" "We're almost out," Willis replied through gritted teeth, his breath coming in short gasps. "The charges are set. We're heading for the docking bay now." The ship shuddered again. A new wave of Jarhin soldiers, more desperate than ever, was closing in on their position. The human soldiers fought back with everything they had, fending off the attackers in close-quarters combat as they continued to make their way to the docking bay. The corridor was narrow, filled with debris and flickering lights. But Willis's team was relentless. They had come too far to fail now. "Just keep moving," Willis urged his team. "We're not losing this one." In the distance, the hum of the docking bay doors could be heard. It was close. So close. But there was no guarantee the Jarhin wouldn't manage to catch up before they could escape. As if on cue, the airlock doors at the end of the corridor began to hiss open. The team sprinted toward them, the sounds of alien footfalls echoing behind them. They were out of time. Hayes's voice came over the comm again. "All units, prepare for retreat. Full evacuation in 30 seconds." The countdown had begun. Willis reached the airlock first, slamming his palm against the control panel. The doors hissed closed just as the first wave of Jarhin soldiers rounded the corner. There was no turning back now. The escape pods were locked and ready, and Earth's fleet had prepared to pull back once the boarding teams were clear. Hayes and the other commanders had ensured the fleet stayed on the offensive, drawing attention away from the flagship's vulnerability until the moment the crew could escape. It had been a high-stakes game, and now, with their mission complete, the game was about to end. "We're in," Willis said, his voice calm now. "We've made it." The escape pods launched, the crew already getting their bearings as the pods shot into space. But the Liberty's Edge had no time to wait. The Jarhin flagship, already on the brink, was moments from its inevitable collapse. There was no time for celebration, no time for relief. "On my mark, all ships break off and begin the final retreat." "We've done our job," Hayes ordered, her eyes locked on the monitor. "This ends now." Earth's fleet had already fought against impossible odds, and now it was time to finish what they had started. The Jarhin flagship, crippled and dying, was set to implode, taking a majority of the remaining enemy fleet with it. The countdown had reached its final seconds. Mark. At that command, every human ship, swift and powerful, retreated into the dark void of space, leaving behind the wreckage of the flagship and the scattered remnants of the Jarhin fleet. The massive explosion lit up the void like a supernova, the shockwave rippling through the surrounding space as debris and fragments of the flagship were thrown outward. Earth's victory had come at a high cost, but the price had been paid. Humanity had proven that they could stand against the invincible. The explosion from the Zarhin flagship lit up the cold expanse of space, a brilliant flash of light that lingered for a moment longer than it should have. It was a moment frozen in time, a symbolic end to the war. In the distance, the remnants of the once mighty alien fleets scattered like dying stars, their lights dimming as they were torn apart by the force of the explosion. The silence that followed was deafening. Commander Rachel Hayes stood on the bridge of the Liberty's Edge *, her eyes locked on the debris field as the human fleet began to regroup. The victory was theirs, but it was a bitter one. So much had been lost. So many brave souls had sacrificed everything to protect Earth. Yet, as the debris from the Zarhin flagship slowly drifted away, a sense of relief washed over her. Earth had survived. Humanity had won. "Status report," Hayes said quietly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion in her body. She'd led her fleet through the storm, and now, at last, the storm had passed. "All ships accounted for, Commander," came the response from the communications officer. "The Zarhin fleet is in disarray. We've suffered losses, but we've held our ground. The enemy is retreating. What's left of them?" Hayes nodded, her eyes still focused on the stars. They had done it. The invasion had been repelled, but at what cost? The human fleet had been reduced, their ships damaged, and many lives had been lost. But humanity had proven something more important than survival. They had proven their will to fight, their ingenuity, and their unbreakable spirit. "We've given them something they'll never forget," Hayes murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. In the quiet moments that followed, the fleet began its slow return to Earth. The Liberty's Edge moved with purpose, the human ships trailing in its wake, like a line of stars stretching back home. The battle was over, but the war had changed them all. Earth was no longer the underdog. It was a world that had stood against an empire and emerged victorious. The universe would never look at humanity the same way again. Meanwhile, aboard the Thunderstrike Lieutenant Mark Willis couldn't help but stare out at the fading light of the Zarhin flagship. The victory had been hard-won, and it had cost them dearly. But as he watched the fragments of the alien ship break apart, he felt a weight lift from his chest. Earth was safe. "Nice work, Lieutenant," came the voice of his squadron leader over the comms. "You did it. We all did." Willis allowed himself a small smile, though it was tinged with the weariness of battle. "We did," he said, his voice quieter now. "It was worth it." Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. It was the dawn of a new era for humanity, a time of rebuilding, of healing, and of reflection. But it was also a time of celebration. The world's leaders had come together, not as separate nations, but as one people, united by the trials they had faced and the victory they had earned. Humanity had stood tall against an empire that had thought them weak. The message was clear. Earth would never again be a passive player in the galaxy. The universe had learned one simple truth: never underestimate humanity. And as Earth's leaders looked to the stars, they knew that the future was not defined by the strength of alien fleets or the power of empires, but by the indomitable will of those who called this planet home. In the years that followed, the human fleet would continue to grow, expanding its reach across the stars, its ships now symbols of Earth's resilience. And though many challenges would still lie ahead, humanity had shown that no force, no matter how great, could ever defeat them. The battle had been won, and with it, Earth had secured its place in the cosmos, not as an underdog, but as a force to be reckoned with.